back to Nice News at 7 p.m. on this Monday. So this week we are looking at the oh so cheerful topic of death. What is it? Why are we so afraid of it? And most importantly, how can we embrace it? So that is all coming up in the next 40 minutes. But first, as always, it's time to go over to Kaie, who's going to tell us more about this week's topic. Over to you, Kaie.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Good evening, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us. As Stephen says, we are going to talk about death, and he very kindly provided us with our quote for today, which is, let's face it, none of us are getting out of this alive. He said that last week. But before we get onto the topic of death, I wanted to share just a few quick nice news stories with you. The links, as always, will be provided. You may remember on a couple of shows ago, we talked about celebrating life. One of the ways we did that was with the cacao ceremony, which Stephen took part in. Well, you'll be happy to know that not only is cacao good for you, but it can help you blast through your fears. Our second story is for music lovers. If you are a fan of the Foo Fighters, you will know that the frontman, Dave Grohl, has been in an ongoing drum battle with 10-year-old Nandi Bushell. She challenged him to a drum-off. He accepted, and Nandi not only held her own, but Grohl actually conceded defeat in the first round of their drum-off. They've had a couple since then, and he's been so impressed with her that he's written her a story. And our last story right now is about a seal who paddle-boarded, hiked. I'm not even sure that's a word, but apparently he was just too tired to swim and decided he was going to jump on somebody's paddleboard to get a ride home. Darren Ford and Kerry Rocket were in a group of paddleboarders along the River Arun in West Sussex when a seal swam up to them and hopped on Kerry's board. Now, it says when he got tired of being on Kerry's board, it jumped off and went to somebody else's. Perhaps he was just tired and didn't like the way that Kerry was paddling. But anyway, he went on a couple of people's boards before he jumped off and swam away. As I said, the links to those stories will be provided later in the show. So let's get back to today's show, death. Well, you know, they say there's only two things certain in life, death and taxes. And while you may be able to legally avoid taxes, you cannot avoid death. So let's look at death. What is it called? The Grim Reaper, sleeping with the fishes, the big sleep, whatever you call it. For some people, it strikes the fear of God into them. And it's one of those topics, just like money, that nobody seems to like talking about. But why is it that people are so afraid of death and talking about it? Well, perhaps it stems from the fear that it's unknown. Nobody actually knows what happens when we die. Yes, there have been thousands of stories, if not millions of stories of people who have had near-death experiences, but these are often dismissed as sensory events. After all, a near-death experience is not the same as a return from death and tell you about it experience, is it? There are a number of religions, in particular Hinduism and Buddhism, that don't believe in the finality of death. They believe in reincarnation, that death in one form is just the beginning of life in another. Across Latin America, the Day of the Dead is a celebration of death and life. And in New Orleans, they have jazz funerals where live jazz music is played and the funeral cortege sings and dances its way to the final resting place. Now, later on in the show, I will be sharing some of the different ways in which people around the world view death and honor their dead. And of course, I'll have lots more nice news for you. But right now, it's back to Stephen and the subject of death.
Thank you, Kaie. So, death. This lockdown and the threat of COVID has presented us all with our own mortality. And with the threat of death facing each and every one of us as a grim reality for possibly the first time ever, although, as I said, none of us are going to get out of this alive. We're all going to die. We thought it's time we discussed the elephant in the room and really examined what it is. And most importantly, how we can embrace it so it's no longer a negative issue in our lives. As always, we went out and about asking members of the general public about their views on death. And this is what they said.
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure what death means to me. I think on one side there's the logical side that thinks it's just the end of the life and then that's it, there's nothing else. But then there's another side of me that thinks maybe it's the start of something new and there's something after life, but I'm not entirely sure. But I'm not religious, so I don't believe that there's a set sort of heaven and hell. but I like to think that there might be something.
Death to me would mean an unknown end, like kind of the end of me, a nothingness after life. I've never really experienced losing anyone, so it's kind of the fear of loss and the fear of the unknown.
I lost my mum at 27, so it just means the end of a relationship, the end of someone special in your life.
To me, death is kind of the stop of something and like the start of something new. I like to think of it in more of an optimistic way, to like kind of stop myself from going down the route of like loneliness and darkness and like fear. So yeah, I like to think that it kind of is the stop of the life we're currently living, and then moving on to a better life or a different life or something along the lines of that.
I think one thing that helps me to embrace death is that without death we'd have eternal life, and we wouldn't, I think I would struggle to motivate myself to do anything with my life, whereas the thought of having an end to your life, it spurs you on to sort of do things while you can before you get old and stuff. So that's how I look at it. And I also think that a lot of deaths can be a way of picking someone out of their misery. So that's one way of embracing it as well, I think.
So by embracing life, you can embrace death and make the most of the life you've got left.
I think embracing death is like embracing life. It's just accepting that there's nothing we can do about it and just kind of living and for the moment, and kind of accepting that, yeah, everyone's going to die, but it doesn't mean that we have to kind of not live almost, and just kind of taking every day as it comes, and also not dwelling on it. I think if I sat and thought about what death is and what it will be like, I would never get out of bed, but just kind of that very human instinct of just getting on and living helps to like kind of just live.
To live life to the absolute fullest and just do everything that you want to do, tell loved ones that you love them, go and see people that you don't usually see, like family members and people like that. I think during this time it's so easy to understand how quick people can come and go in life, no matter what the age, no matter what the circumstance. And I think it's become definitely apparent to me that like I need to do things that I want to do and do things that I enjoy and make me happy, build relationships and stuff, because you don't know when someone's going to go from your life, you don't know when you're going to go, and I think it's really important to make sure you've looked back at your life and feel fulfilled and satisfied with everything that you've achieved. So yeah, I think you can definitely look at death in a more positive way and kind of just see it as how you could embrace the life that you're currently living and that you're blessed to be living at the moment.
I've got to say, I'm amazed at how insightful and wise these young people are. I don't think I was so kind of...
I know I wasn't. I definitely wasn't. You know, I didn't even think about death, and I'm really blown away by how, and this isn't to make younger people sound shallow in the least, but the depth of their feeling and the depth of what they're saying, I find is particularly moving.
I like the fact they're all positive, aren't they,
Yeah.
about that? You know, without death, there's no meaning to life. So it is a reminder to really live life to the full, isn't it? I think that's really important. Let's go to our audience now then. Let's ask Jonathan. I think you're sat in the dark. I think we're going to have to whip around and buy you a light bulb or something. What do you think of death, Jonathan? What does it mean to you?
It's a weird one, I think. I don't know, it's kind of like, obviously referring to the videos, you can't have sort of life without death, so it sort of balances it out. But I don't know, everyone sort of thinks of death as sort of something to sort of be scared of. It's obviously it's inevitable, it's going to happen, but like this show is pointing out, there's sort of weirdly some positive to it.
Yeah. And when you die, what do you think happens? Are you worm food, or does some spiritual?
I like to think there's something there when we eventually go. I mean, I'm not too overly religious, but I like to believe there's something there. But I think personally, it's something to do with our energy sort of gets like absorbed back into sort of like a recycle sort of thing. So our energy goes back into the earth, and it sort of, yeah.
Yeah. How does that make you feel? That more optimistic, that life continues on some level?
Gives some sort of hope, at least, that you can continue living on beyond that.
Yeah.
If that is the case, then that's, I guess, there's another life to go to.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. I think what you said there, a lot of people would agree with. Let's go to our floor manager now, Declan, because Declan does want to share his experience. I now get why Declan's had a haircut. He knew he was going to be on the show tonight. So let's ask you then, Declan. So yeah, what do you think of death, and what do you think happens? And share some of your recent experience.
Okay, so I recently went to a funeral about a month ago, and prior to that, the thought of death was a very scary and obviously inevitable thought, something that you couldn't hide from, something that was obviously going to come to everyone. But since I recently went to a funeral of my girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, who sadly drowned recently, I went there, and although obviously it was a sad day, it was nice to see so many different types of people, so many different cultures there, and the effect that he had on so many lives. So it's nice to see that although someone has gone, the family were very thankful for everyone being there, and not just the family and cousins and uncles, but friends that he hadn't even seen recently, like my girlfriend he hadn't seen for 4 years, that she was there. She was very emotional. I didn't even know him, and I was very emotional about it because it was such a sad day. But then after, we all went around the house, we had food, had drink, and they were very welcoming, talking to everyone and very kind. So that's definitely changed my thought that although it is a sad time, it definitely brings people together and forces different cultures to sort of collide and cope with what's happened.
So it's quite life affirming then, you think? Celebrating someone who has passed over.
Yeah, not being sad that they're gone, but celebrating what they brought to the world, and how they've affected you individually.
So what do you think happens when you die?
Well, I think I'm a bit of a pessimist more than an optimist about this. Although I'd like to think that something does happen and there is an afterlife or your energy goes somewhere else, it's more hopeful thinking rather than thinking it does happen.
Yeah, okay. No, thanks so much for sharing that. That's interesting. So in a moment, we are going to be joined by our special guest, Nina Winter, hypnotherapist, who's going to be helping us explore the topic of death in detail. Many of Nina's clients come to her with huge anxieties over death, and it does seem we all kind of share those anxieties. Death is a fearful topic, isn't it? But as always, to cheer us up, here is Kaie with some more of the week's nice news.
This one is a one that pays tribute, Stephen, and I thought this story was so moving when I came across it. I think every generation has a date that is etched in their mind, that date that you will know exactly what you were doing when you heard a particular thing. For me, and many in my generation, it was 9/11. And to honour the 343 firefighters who lost their lives in the line of duty on that horrendous day, every year on September the 11th, firefighters across America begin a ritual. At 8:46 in the morning, which is the time when the first hijacked plane hit the first of the Twin Towers, firefighters climb up 110 flights of stairs dressed in their full firefighting gear. Now, the climb is done in public buildings, in stadiums, or on exercise machinery in the gym. And the reason they do that is that 110 flights of stairs is the heroic distance that the fallen firefighters, men and women, had to travel on that day inside the World Trade Center. That is a day I can promise you I will not be forgetting anytime soon. A nice story now, a happier story. We're going to talk about little kids. We've all had a visit from the Tooth Fairy, and I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that none of us has ever received a letter. But a child got an invaluable lesson in dental hygiene from a tooth fairy by the name of Barry T. Tooth Fairy. Now, the letter acknowledged receipt of said tooth, but said there'd been a delay in payment because the tooth wasn't up to its usual standard. Although, according to the letter, they expected some sort of wear and tear, this particular tooth had traces of Fanta, chocolate, and cereal. The letter went on to say that payment would be made this time, but in future, the child should take better care of their teeth, because if not, there would be no more future tooth fairy payments. I did laugh when I saw that one.
I think someone's been spying on that kid's diet, haven't they?
There's too much insider knowledge. How do you know it's Fanta as opposed to Coke?
That's what I think.
How did you know that? Yeah.
Parents are feeding information, aren't they? So
I think so. But I did particularly like that 9/11 story. I thought that was...
Absolutely. It's almost like facing death gives life its biggest moments, isn't it?
Basically, yeah.
A lot of life can be quite boring, sort of inconsequential, and then
not our lives, Stephen. We don't have lives. Yeah, not our lives.
Doing this show, and
yeah.
No, it's brilliant. So thank you, Kaie. Yes, so we are joined now by our special guest Nina, who's going to help us explore this seemingly gruesome topic of death. So thank you, Nina, for coming back. So tell us, what is your story? How have you become like a death expert, if I can call you that?
I've never called myself that before, but I think my first experience with death was because I was a nurse. I trained as a nurse in Oxford, and we came across in casualty and on the wards, children, teenagers, older people dying, many different types of death. It's never happy, I've got to say, it's never happy to be a nurse to lose a patient, because your aim is to get them better and to get them home. But we don't always succeed. We do what we can do. So you manage the situation, and you look after the patient, of course, and you look after the family members when that time comes where the person has to part. So you don't just look after the patient, you look after the family as well.
So obviously experiencing a lot of death, how has that shaped your belief of what happens, where we go?
Okay, well, this is a shell, and we are all going to die. As we know, we are going to die, and I think it's how we look after this shell while we're alive that makes it good, makes life good. If we treat it properly, it will look after us usually. So I think, how does it affect us? I think we just have to make most of every day. That's the thing. That's what I believe. And we have to strive to be happy and go in the right direction to get this body happy, so the soul inside can function.
I do wonder, if we were told our end date, if we'd live differently. I do wonder.
I know I'm going to die when I'm expecting to live to about 113. I
want to be around till then as well. I want to see the big changes that are going to happen.
Yeah, I only want to do that if all of my mates are still going to be here. There's no point living to 130 if all your mates are dead.
Oh, well, we're going to be okay.
All right, okay, well, that's fine then. That's cool.
We can still Zoom. We can still do the show for like... So many people are scared of death that you could even say they don't really live. I know some people that are, whenever you say you're going to do something, oh my God, but what if this happens? What if that happens? And then when you actually look what they're doing, they're not really doing that much. They're playing it really safe. Why do you think people are so afraid?
Because it's unpredictable. I mean, people are frightened of flying because, you're getting into a cylinder, that could fall down. You don't know whether you're, when you walk along a cliff, you could fall down. If you're, health fears, will that happen if I go and do that? If I speak to this person, if I don't wash my hands? So people are worried all the time about this unpredictable thing. So we have to just be sensible and keep it in balance. That's the thing, not dwelling on death. We know it's going to happen, but we might as well just make as much of life as we can in the meantime. And what I do with the hypnotherapy is that I take away that fear. I go in, I take it away to make that person feel happier in their everyday and enjoying the now. That's what's important.
Yeah, okay. And that can just be done simply through, how many sessions of hypnotherapy?
I would usually see somebody for 3 hours in one sitting.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And how many people have death as their issue? What sort of percentage would you say?
I would say maybe about 10% would come in with 20% would come in with a fear of well, it's more because it covers even fear of spiders. Spiders might bite me, and what happens if it hurts, and it hurts so much so the child doesn't necessarily think of a spider killing it, but if a dog had big teeth, it might think it's going to kill me. You know, so it's probably a high percentage, because any fear, any anxiety, really, what's the worst that can happen? I could die. So
it's underpinning everything almost. Death is underpinning all our anxieties. That's quite interesting. So,
it's a high number. I think so. Yeah.
What is the best perspective that we can have on death, would you say?
It's part of life. Death is simply part of life. It's part of life, and the best perspective is, well, we've got to just know that the people that are around us, we've got to enjoy them. We've got to. I mean, my dad died very recently. I had his funeral 2 days ago. And my perspective on him is he was a fantastic man. He was loved by so many people, not just me and the other siblings that I have. We enjoyed him, and he enjoyed us. And people remember him, like the other people said. It's about the memory of those people. So we have to grasp life so that when we leave, when we go, that we're remembered for something. We've done as much as we could do to do good along the way. Does that quite answer it? You can ask me again.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I know Steve Jobs says you have to make a dent on the universe. That was his.
Yeah, I think we've got to be remembered somehow. Do something. Help one person really well. Or,
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because he was a great achiever, but they say that when he was on his deathbed, he regretted not spending more times on the kind of seemingly smaller things, like his relationship with his family and his daughter. And so despite the fact he tried to make this massive dent, it was actually the stuff that we've all got within our reach that he took for granted, and he was sad about that.
We all make a difference.
We can. We need to become aware of our worth, don't we? And that's to do with our self-talk, which we've covered already. No, brilliant, Nina. We're going to come back to you then. So now, to cheer us up, it's time for some more nice news.
Thank you. Just quickly, Nina, going back to what you were saying about making a difference. I remember when my grandfather died, and we got to the church, and I saw hordes of people. And I thought, there was a funeral before us, so we've got to wait for these people to go before we can go into the church. And up until that point, I'd done a good job of holding it together. But when I realized that these hundreds of people were there to say goodbye to him, and there was one old man in a wheelchair who lived like dead in the country. He had to get somebody to bring him. But he was like, no, I had to come and pay respects. And it was at that point, Nina, that all the holding together I was doing completely went out of the window, because I then realized I had a legacy to live up to, It was comforting, but it was scary at the same time, because anyway, so now we're talking about being buried, coffins. You guys are gonna love this one. When I came across this, I was like, this is how I really, really want to go. I've always said that I wanted to be buried either in the back garden of our house in Barbados, or failing that, cremated and scattered in the Caribbean Sea in front of the house. So if I am buried, I cannot think of a finer coffin to be in than what's called a Ga fantasy coffin. When you see these coffins, you will understand why, because they are truly works of art. Now, they're made by people in Ghana called the Ga Adangbe people. And the coffins are made by specialist carpenters. And there's actually a campaign going at the moment to get the UN to recognize their handiwork as some sort of special indigenous art. The Ga people believe that death isn't the end of the world, it's just the beginning, and that life continues in the next world in the same way as it does in this one. Like many African cultures, they believe that the ancestors are so much more powerful than us living and are able to influence the lives of the people who are left behind. So the fantasy coffins are only ever seen on the day of the burial, and they symbolize the dead person's social status and professions. Now, you can only get one though if you've got the appropriate status and you're the head of a family. That's the only way you can be buried in one of these coffins. And you'll see from the links that we provide, coffins are depicting animals. I've seen lions and giraffes. I've seen aeroplanes, shoes, trainers, cigarette packets, drink bottles, whatever it is, they can make it for you, but only if you have the appropriate status. And you remember earlier I said that I wanted my ashes to be thrown in the sea. Well, Deliveroo is making life a beach for us. It's not only cleaning up our plates, because you remember last week we spoke about how much money we'd spent on takeaways in the lockdown. Deliveroo are giving something back. So what they've decided to do, the weather's been nice, as we were talking about earlier, and lots of people have been going to the seaside and unfortunately leaving their rubbish behind. So Deliveroo has created a Roo-cycle campaign where people are being encouraged to pick up rubbish at beaches. Right now they're 5, but they're looking to roll out the number. 5 beaches around the UK, and as a reward, they're giving people £10 to be used on the Deliveroo app. So I think that's a good idea.
Thank you, Kaie. Yes, so as we've said, so many people are terrified of death. So we asked, why? What is everyone afraid of? And where does this fear come from?
I think people are really afraid of death because it is the unknown, and this life is all we've kind of ever known. So there's no way of telling what will happen after you die, and no one can really die and come back from it and tell people what's happened or what's going to happen to them. So I think people fear it so much because you don't know and there's no way of knowing, and leaving loved ones behind and not being without them, so being lonely and stuff. I think that's a lot of people's fears. So yeah, I think that's why a lot of people are afraid of death and just not knowing what's going to happen next.
The reason I think most people are afraid of death it's because it's the end of their being. Potentially death, the end could be very painful depending on what you die of, and it's just letting you know that you're not going to be here forever.
I think most people are scared of death because of the fear of the unknown. No one knows what happens to you once you die. And that's pretty scary, I guess. And I guess if you're religious, you'd be scared about heaven and hell, whether you've sort of earned your place in heaven and things like that.
I think people are scared of death and dying because it's, again, that fear of the unknown, of not knowing what it's going to be like to be dead. I think for me especially, I'm not scared of the actual process of dying, more of what happens after and the fact that I will no longer exist.
I think what I fear the most about death is being lonely and kind of not knowing what's going on. I don't really like the unknown myself, so I think that is kind of a really big factor that plays in how I feel about it. No, you will never know the answer until you do die, and even then you don't really know how your brain, like how you would feel. So yeah, I think it's definitely not knowing what's going to happen, and also being without the people that have been in this life so close to me, and just being lonely and being confused and on my own. I definitely think those are the most highest things that scare me and I fear most about death.
I wouldn't really say I fear my own death, because I feel like that's that, and you're dead, like you're not going to be worrying about being dead. But I would say I'd probably worry about other people's deaths around me because of how final it is, and that's that, you're never going to see them again. But my own death, I don't really worry about it.
So I don't have any fears about death. I just hope that basically it happens to me when I'm old and grey.
I would definitely say that I fear the unknown aspect of death, but also the sense that there's no control. Could happen at any point, and like, obviously everyone dies. It's something that we can't avoid, but it's also something that I really want to avoid.
Yeah, some really good insight there. I think I know the reason why we're all so scared of death. Hollywood. I think it's the films we've watched. I think when I think like especially the ones when the films you saw as a kid, Jaws absolutely terrified me. And if you think of the way the movie starts, when that swimmer gets eaten, the pain that she seems to be in, it's absolutely horrific.
I don't know. I mean, I always took movies for what they were, entertainment. I never took them that seriously. And full disclosure, I've never watched Jaws. My fear around death isn't the process itself. My biggest fear is being, I think they call it locked-in syndrome, when you're in pain and you're dying, but you can't communicate to people that you're in pain and you're dying. I think that would worry me more than the actual process. At the end of the day, there's nothing we can do about it. We can't stop the process. So, just live life and have a party while you're here.
I think it is the pain. I think that's what, again, that's what I've seen in Hollywood movies. But This is what I've read. I follow a specific spiritual kind of practice. And they say that when we die, that death is a really euphoric experience. And we go back to pure positive energy. And there's the story of Stanley Livingstone, the explorer, who was, there was one point, he didn't die, but he was close to death. He was in the jaws of a lion. And he said he felt this euphoria wrap around him, and there was no pain whatsoever. And
the euphoria was the lion's breath.
That's what he said. If he wasn't impeding himself there, do you go with that one?
No. I mean, again, Stephen, you and I have discussed this before, and I was like, nobody has died and come back and said, this is what it's like. So everything we think we know about what happens after death is a figment of somebody's imagination, because nobody knows. And I think that's the fun part as well. I believe in reincarnation. I believe I'm coming back, because I'm too fabulous just for one lifetime.
Yeah, we agree. I think you have to find a positive perspective, because otherwise you are kind of going through life with a disability, aren't you, kind of?
I think so.
It's like, go back to our self-talk episode, the narrative, you have to become conscious that this narrative I've got from the outside world is not doing me any favours. It's limiting my zest life kind of thing. And you have to recalibrate that and come to your own decision about what you think is a positive perspective. And then because I think I've done that, and it's a no-brainer. I'm not worried about it. I just think when I die, it's not my issue, because it's game over for me. It's the other people left behind that it's an issue for.
Like you said, Stephen, none of us are getting out of this alive.
I just wonder if there is the kind of issue. Is it like just being in a dark room and you're like, someone's turned the lights out, what's going on? And you're just in a dark room. That would be a bit boring. So I hope
that would be. John's just asked, is it true that before you die, your life flashes before our eyes? Okay.
I reckon it's like Big Brother, when you get evicted and they have the edited highlights and they go, here are your best bits. And they've got contemporary pop music.
Oh, no.
It looks amazing. But I reckon there's some people, they're going to have a blank screen. They're going to go, go back.
John, we don't know, because nobody's come back and written a book. I think it's more a case of people simultaneously realize they're dying, and B, suddenly start thinking about all of the things that they wanted to do that they didn't, or the things they should have done that they didn't, or things they could have done better.
Let's ask our audience now. Let's ask Giselle, what is the most frightening association with death that you've had? Is it a movie, or what has terrified you about the concept of death?
The only thing that terrifies me, it doesn't terrify me, I'm not terrified about death. I don't really think about it that much. But I'm in the lucky position that I've not had anyone close to me die as yet. Been to tons of funerals and supported my friends when their parents have died, or I've had a friend of mine, her very young son, he died. So But like Steve, I just believe that we go back to pure positive energy, and we've had this experience here, and I believe that it's not going to be anything negative when I die. The only thing that's negative is I don't want to leave my daughter, and I don't want my mum to leave me. So yeah.
You can haunt them, can't you? So you've got some kind of...
No! Can't be haunted. Well, yeah, actually, you can haunt people. I've told my goddaughter if she doesn't look after my plants when I die, I will come back and haunt her.
The thing that I'm terrified about when I die is that someone will have to go through my cupboards and deal with all my junk.
I do think if a child goes before, I think that's when that sense of that there was so much potential that was kind of missed.
Nina, can I ask you something? I know when my goddaughter died, in addition to me being very upset, there was an anger that I felt that almost bordered on rage. And I was wondering, is that normal? I kept thinking how unfair it was. And I've told my godchildren time and time again, life is not here to be fair. Life stopped being fair when you realized there was no Santa Claus and no Tooth Fairy. But I just felt a rage, like how could whichever God you believe in allow this to happen? And I did get very, very angry, and that scared me, because I didn't think I should be getting angry, if that makes any sense.
But it's a natural feeling. It's a natural reaction. We feel it's unfair. And it is unfair. You know, young people shouldn't die. You know, nobody should become ill, really.
Yeah.
But it happens, and we worry about it. Is it going to happen? And when it does happen, then we worry about it. There is no point worrying about it. All we can do is to eat well, behave well, do the best that we can. But worrying about it, it is going to happen. And worrying too much about it makes it worse and almost can bring it on.
Yeah.
So we almost, it's tough. Nobody wants to die, I'm sure, other than those that really feel that life is not worth living anymore. I think people are often very worried about who they're leaving behind. You know, the sadness when somebody dies is really, they worry, will they be financially okay? And, you know, that's very sad. And the family's parents to lose, it's wrong for a mother to lose a child, of course.
Yeah. And I think that's where my anger stemmed from. It was like, how could this happen?
Yeah.
But that was balanced with the fact that, Kaie, this is your godchild, this is not your child, and no matter how badly you feel, and we all felt terribly, it paled in comparison to what her mum was feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no justice. And how can you say there's a religion when somebody who is so small should be taken away? But people do take comfort from religion, and spiritualists feel that, you know, that if we can think of this that we're just here for a little while on this earth, and that the spirit, whatever buzz it is, it sort of travels off to somewhere else and moves into another planet area, or travels into another person, or whatever. The spirit, I think, my dad is still around. I'll still talk to him, and he carries on in me, like that girl.
Yeah.
I think that's it, isn't it? You have to find a mental perspective where if you still feel you've got a link to them, a connection, then you can cope with their absence if you feel you're still able to communicate. No, thank you so much. Thank you, Nina. So I think we need cheering up a bit. So Kaie, over to you.
This one is a doozy. I came across this story watching BBC Extraordinary Rituals, and I just had to share it with you because it deals with funeral practices. Everywhere in the world, we have funeral practices as a way of honoring our dead and helping us say goodbye. But for the Torajan people of Indonesia, they take it to a completely different level. Their funerals are very much a celebration of life, and they have the most elaborate funerals on earth. So much so that their funeral practices are considered endangered by UNESCO because they are the only ones who do it this way. Now, in the West, we work hard and save money to live a good life. The Torajan people do exactly the same thing. They work hard and save money, but to make sure that they have a good funeral. In that society, it's the extravagance of the funeral that marks your family status, not your weddings. So when somebody dies, their body is kept at home until the family has enough money to pay for the funeral. And that can take years. So until they're buried, they're kept in the house and they are not considered dead. They are referred to as the person who is sick. Young men have been known to postpone or cancel their weddings if a parent or grandparent of the girl that they love is old enough to die soon. When the funeral does happen, it can last up to a week, and then once a year in August, the deceased are exhumed so that their remains can be washed, groomed, and dressed in new clothes. The mummies are then walked around the village by following a path of straight lines. Now, there's a spiritual entity called Hiang who only moves in straight lines, and that's why the mummies have to walk in straight lines, otherwise it's considered unlucky. But if you get the opportunity, please go to BBC Online and have a look at extraordinary rituals. You will see the ones that I'm talking about. It is absolutely mind-blowing. They actually sit them up in chairs and talk to them like they're still living.
If there is one thing for sure, this world is so extraordinary.
It is. It
Who's
is.
going to bow out soon? You've got to stick around and explore this world.
Exactly.
Crazy in summer. Oh no, that's brilliant. So that is it for another show. So thank you for everyone who took part in today's show and our team of volunteers, as always, who helped make it happen. Thank you, Nina, for stepping in at the last moment and sharing wisdom as always. So next week, we're trying to make this like a natural movement forward from each show. So next week, we are looking at spirituality, asking, what is it? How do you know you got it? What does it do for you? So join us live next Monday at 7 for that. Kaie, over to you to close the show.
Well, thank you all again for joining us. And I'm going to leave you with a quote from Mark Twain, who says, "Man always dies before he is fully born."